Victor Moretti stood in the doorway of the servants' quarters with an announcement that would shatter every rule the city's underworld had ever known. The most dangerous man in the territory had made his choice for his brother's wedding, and it wasn't the senator's daughter, the attorney's niece, or any woman from the carefully curated list of power players waiting for his call. It was Lena Hart, the housemaid who had spent 3 years perfecting the art of being invisible. In a world where every decision carried the weight of empires, Victor had just made the one choice no one saw coming, and in doing so, he had just rewritten the rules for both of them. If you want to see how one impossible choice changes two lives forever, stay with me until the end. And when you're done, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Moretti estate had seen many things over the decades. It had witnessed celebrations that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, negotiations that decided the fate of entire neighborhoods, and violence that never made the morning papers. But it had never seen anything quite like the silence that fell over the servants' wing when Victor Moretti walked through the door at 11:30 on a Thursday night. Lena Hart was folding linens in the small workroom off the main kitchen, her hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned long ago that invisibility was a survival skill. She heard his footsteps first, the measured, deliberate stride that everyone in the house recognized. Then she heard the sudden hush that followed him like a shadow. She didn't look up. That was the first rule. When the family was near, you kept your eyes on your work and your presence minimal. Lena Hart, his voice cut through the quiet like a blade through silk, deep, controlled, and absolutely certain. Her hands stilled on the white cotton sheet. Every instinct screamed at her to pretend she hadn't heard, to keep folding, to maintain the careful invisibility that had kept her safe for 3 years. But you didn't ignore Victor Moretti. Not if you valued your position. Not if you valued your life. She turned slowly, her gaze lifting no higher than the third button on his custom suit jacket. "Mr. Moretti, look at me." It wasn't a request. Lena raised her eyes and immediately understood why men twice Victor's size backed down from confrontations with him. At 34, he carried authority like other men carried watches, as a natural extension of who he was. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and his eyes held the kind of cold intelligence that missed nothing and forgot less. But it was the absolute stillness in him that truly unsettled. Victor Moretti never fidgeted, never rushed, never showed uncertainty. He simply decided, and the world rearranged itself accordingly. "My brother's wedding is tomorrow night," he said, his gaze fixed on her face with an intensity that made her want to step back. "I need a date." The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Behind Victor, Lena could see Margaret, the head housekeeper, frozen in the doorway with her mouth slightly open. In the kitchen beyond, the usual clatter of dinner cleanup had stopped entirely. I I don't understand, sir." Lena's voice came out steadier than she felt. "It's straightforward. The wedding begins at 7. You'll be ready at 6:30. A stylist will arrive at 3 to prepare you. Is that clear?" It wasn't clear at all. Nothing about this made sense. Victor Moretti didn't date staff. He didn't date anyone, as far as Lena knew. His romantic life was a subject of endless speculation but zero confirmed information. And even if he did date, there were 1,000 women more suitable than a housemaid who spent her days changing sheets and polishing silver. "Sir, I think there might be some mistake." "There's no mistake." He pulled a card from his jacket pocket and held it out to her. "My private number. If you have concerns about the arrangement, you'll address them with me directly. Not with the staff. Not with anyone else. Understood?" Lena took the card with fingers that trembled slightly despite her best efforts. The heavy cardstock felt expensive between her fingers. "Mr. Moretti, I don't think I'm the right choice for— I didn't ask for your opinion on my choices." His tone didn't rise, didn't sharpen. It simply stated fact. "I asked if you understood the instructions." She met his eyes again and saw something there that stopped her next protest before it formed. This wasn't a whim. This wasn't a mistake. For reasons she couldn't fathom, Victor Moretti had made a deliberate choice, and he expected it to be executed exactly as he'd outlined. "I understand," she said quietly. "Good." He turned toward the door, then paused. Lena. Yes, sir? You'll call me Victor tomorrow night. Not sir, not Mr. Moretti, Victor. He glanced back at her, and for just a fraction of a second, something almost like curiosity crossed his features. People are going to be watching you, judging you, questioning why you're there. Let them wonder. You answer to no one but me. Then he was gone, his footsteps receding down the hallway with the same measured certainty they'd arrived with. The servant's wing exploded into whispers the moment he was out of earshot. Did that just happen? Margaret's voice was barely above a whisper. Lena looked down at the card in her hand. Simple black lettering on cream cardstock, a phone number, nothing else. I think so. Lena Hart. Margaret moved closer, her eyes wide with a mixture of concern and disbelief. Do you have any idea what you've just agreed to? I didn't exactly agree. He didn't give me a choice. That's how it works with them. Margaret lowered her voice further. The Morettis don't ask, they inform. But this is unprecedented. Victor's never brought anyone to a family event. Not in the 15 years I've worked here. Maybe he just needed someone presentable and didn't want to deal with the complications of asking someone from his usual circles. Even as Lena said it, she didn't believe it. Margaret shook her head slowly. Victor Moretti doesn't do anything without 3 reasons and a backup plan. If he chose you, it's because you serve a purpose we don't see yet. The thought sent a chill down Lena's spine. She'd worked so hard to be unremarkable, to blend into the background, to be the kind of employee who did excellent work but left no lasting impression. Invisible people were safe people. They didn't attract attention. They didn't become targets. And now the most dangerous man in the city had just put a spotlight directly on her. What do I do? Lena asked, hating the tremor in her voice. Margaret's expression softened. You do exactly what he said. You get ready at 3. You're prepared by 6:30, and you walk into that wedding on his arm like you belong there. She paused. And Lena, whatever happens tomorrow night, you remember one thing. Victor Moretti protects what's his. If he's claiming you as his date, even temporarily, you're under his protection. That means something in this city. Lena nodded, but protection was a double-edged sword. It meant safety from outside threats. But what about the danger of being too close to a man whose empire was built on secrets, power, and calculated violence? She looked down at the card again. Such a simple thing. Just 10 digits that connected directly to one of the most powerful men in the criminal underworld. Get some rest, Margaret said gently. Tomorrow's going to change everything. Sleep didn't come. Lena lay in her small room on the 3rd floor of the servants' wing, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of what had happened. Her mind kept circling back to the same questions. Why her? What possible advantage could Victor gain from bringing a housemaid to his brother's wedding? And why did he look at her with that strange intensity, like he was seeing something everyone else had missed? At 3 in the morning, she finally admitted defeat and got up. The house was silent in that heavy, watchful way that large estates had in the hours before dawn. Lena moved quietly through the hallways, years of practice making her footsteps whisper soft on the hardwood floors. She found herself in the library, a room she cleaned twice a week but never used. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, leather-bound volumes that probably cost more than she made in a year. She ran her fingers along the spines, reading titles in the dim light from the street lamps outside. Couldn't sleep either? Lena spun around, her heart hammering. Victor stood in the doorway, still dressed in the same suit from earlier, though his tie was gone and the top 2 buttons of his shirt were undone. He looked tired, she realized with surprise. The perpetual alertness in his eyes had dimmed slightly, revealing something almost human underneath. I'm sorry, Mr. Moretti, I didn't mean to intrude. It's 3 in the morning. If you're calling me Mr. Moretti, you're not following instructions. He moved into the room with that same controlled grace. And you're not intruding. This is my house. You work here. You have every right to be in this room. I've never used it before. I just needed somewhere to think. About tomorrow. It wasn't a question. Lena nodded. Victor moved to the window, looking out at the manicured grounds that stretched toward the distant city lights. You're wondering why I chose you. Everyone's wondering that. I don't care what everyone thinks. I'm asking what you think. Lena considered lying, offering some safe platitude about being honored by the opportunity. But something about the hour, the quiet intimacy of the dark library, made her choose honesty instead. I think you don't do anything without a reason. I think I'm part of some plan I don't understand, and I think that scares me. He turned to look at her, and in the dim light, his expression was unreadable. Fair assessment. You're right about the plan, wrong about needing to be scared. You're Victor Moretti. Being scared seems appropriate. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You've been working in my house for 3 years. You've cleaned my office, handled my personal items, been in my private spaces. In all that time, have I ever given you a reason to fear me? Lena thought about it. She'd seen Victor angry, the cold, controlled fury that made grown men stammer their apologies. She'd seen him ruthless in business dealings conducted in his home office, but he'd never raised his voice to the staff, never been cruel or petty, never made anyone feel small. No, she admitted, but I've also never been visible to you before. You think you were invisible? Victor's voice held something that might have been amusement. Lena, you're the only member of this household staff who doesn't look at me like I'm a bomb that might explode at any moment. You do your work efficiently, you don't gossip, you don't try to ingratiate yourself or position for favor. In a world where everyone wants something from me, you wanted nothing. That's not invisible. That's exceptional. The compliment, if it was one, left Lena uncertain how to respond. I just tried to do my job well. Exactly. Victor moved closer, and Lena forced herself not to step back. Tomorrow night, dozens of people are going to look at you and see a nobody. A housemaid who got lucky. A woman out of her depth in a world she doesn't understand. Let them think that. Because while they're underestimating you, they're revealing themselves. Revealing what? Who values substance over status? Who judges by appearance rather than character? Who's smart enough to question assumptions? His eyes held hers with that same intensity from earlier. You're not a prop, Lena. You're not a statement. You're a filter. And by the end of tomorrow night, I'll know exactly who in that room is worth my time and who's just playing at power. It was brilliant, in a cold, calculating way. But it also meant Lena would be subjected to judgment, whispers, and likely outright hostility from people who saw her as an interloper. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone, she said quietly. You've handled pressure before. Victor's gaze sharpened. You've been running from something for 3 years, living quiet, staying invisible, never getting close to anyone. I don't know what you're hiding from, and I don't need to know, but I know survival when I see it. Tomorrow night isn't going to be comfortable, but you've survived worse. Lena's breath caught. How could he possibly know? She'd been so careful, so cautious. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. But he didn't push. Get some rest. The stylist arriving this afternoon is going to want you well rested. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Lena, one more thing. After tomorrow night, if you want to go back to being invisible, I'll make that happen. No questions, no consequences. But if you want something different, a different life, different opportunities, we can discuss that too. Then he was gone, leaving Lena alone with thoughts that raced too fast to catch, and a future that suddenly felt far less certain than it had been 24 hours ago. The stylist arrived at precisely 3 o'clock in a flurry of assistants, garment bags, and cosmetic cases that transformed Lena's small room into something resembling a high-end salon. Daniela Romano, the woman announced, air-kissing past both of Lena's cheeks without actually making contact. Victor sent measurements, but we'll need to confirm everything. Strip down to your undergarments. 3 hours blurred together in a haze of fabric swatches, makeup trials, and hair consultations conducted in rapid-fire Italian-accented English. Daniela had an artist's eye and a drill sergeant's demeanor, accepting nothing less than absolute perfection. The dress Victor selected is bold, Daniela said, studying Lena with the intensity of a sculptor examining marble. It will make a statement, but you need to hold yourself like you belong in it, understand? No shrinking, no apologizing with your posture. You walk into that wedding like you own the room. I'm a housemaid, not an actress. Tonight, Bella, you are whatever Victor Moretti says you are. And he says you are his date, so you will look like a woman who belongs on the arm of the most powerful man in the city. Daniela's expression softened slightly. He chose well, you know. You have good bones, clear skin, intelligent eyes. We're not creating beauty. We're just revealing what was already there. By 6:15, Lena barely recognized her own reflection. The dress was a masterpiece of deep emerald silk that wrapped around her body like liquid night, clinging to curves she didn't know she had before falling in an elegant line to the floor. The neckline was modest by evening wear standards, but still revealed collarbones she'd kept hidden under housemaids' uniforms for years. Her dark hair had been styled in loose waves that fell past her shoulders, and Daniela's makeup artist had enhanced her features with a subtle hand that made her eyes look luminous and her lips look fuller without looking artificial. "Remember," Daniela said, making final adjustments to Lena's hair, "you represent Victor Moretti tonight. Every eye will be on you, judging, questioning, speculating. Stand tall, speak clearly, and if anyone makes you uncomfortable, you stay close to Victor. He didn't choose you to throw you to the wolves." A knock at the door made Lena's heart jump. "It's time," Margaret's voice called from the hallway. Daniela stepped back, studying her work with satisfaction. "Perfetto. Now go show them what they've been too blind to see." Lena took a breath, gathered the skirt of her dress, and opened the door. Margaret's eyes widened. "Oh, Lena, you look different?" Lena supplied. "No, you look like yourself, just more." They walked together through the servants' wing toward the main house, and Lena felt the eyes of every staff member following her progress. Some looked encouraging, some looked envious, and some looked worried. She understood all three reactions. Victor was waiting in the main foyer, and when Lena descended the grand staircase, she saw his expression shift in a way she'd never witnessed before. For just a moment, the controlled mask slipped, revealing something that looked almost like surprise. He'd changed into a tuxedo that fit him like it had been designed specifically for his frame, which it probably had been. The sharp lines of the suit emphasized his broad shoulders and lean build, and he'd styled his hair back in a way that made him look even more dangerous than usual. "Lena!" He moved forward as she reached the bottom of the stairs, offering his arm. "You look extraordinary." "Daniela's work," Lena said, trying to deflect the compliment. Daniela revealed what was already there. He echoed the stylist's words. "Ready?" "No, absolutely not." "Yes." "Then let's go make some people very uncomfortable." The car waiting outside was a sleek black Mercedes with tinted windows and a driver who didn't make eye contact. Victor handed Lena into the back seat with the kind of practiced courtesy that suggested he'd done this 1,000 times before, which made Lena wonder, suddenly, about all the women who'd come before her. Had any of them been real? Or were they all strategic choices, pieces moved across Victor's personal chessboard? "You're thinking too loud," Victor observed as the car pulled away from the estate. "I'm trying to understand the rules of a game I didn't know I was playing." "Then let me simplify them." He shifted to face her, his expression serious. "Rule 1. You're with me tonight. That means you're under my protection. No one touches you, threatens you, or disrespects you without answering to me. Rule 2. You don't have to perform or pretend. Just be yourself. The same woman who's been working in my house for 3 years. Rule 3. If at any point you're overwhelmed or need to leave, you tell me. We'll go. No questions, no judgment." "And what are your rules?" Lena asked. "What do you get out of this arrangement?" Victor smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I get to watch people reveal their true colors. I get to see who in my brother's social circle is worth my time and who's just playing at power, and I get the company of someone who doesn't want anything from me." "Everyone wants something." "Then what do you want, Lena?" The question hung in the air between them. What did she want? Safety, anonymity, a life where the past couldn't find her and the future held no unwelcome surprises. But sitting in the back of a Mercedes in an emerald dress, on her way to a wedding on the arm of Victor Moretti, those things suddenly seemed both desperately important and impossibly distant. "I want tonight to be over without incident," she said finally. "Then we have the same goal." Victor looked out the window at the passing city lights. The wedding is at the Palazzo Estate. 600 guests, half of them connected to my family's business interests, the other half connected to my brother's new wife's political family. It's going to be a circus of power plays and social maneuvering. And you're bringing me into the center ring. I'm bringing you as my shield. While everyone's busy judging you, they're not paying attention to the real moves being made. He glanced at her. I know it's not fair to you, but I also know you can handle it. The car turned onto a private road that wound up a hillside, and Lena caught her first glimpse of the Palazzo estate. It was massive, a sprawling Mediterranean-style villa lit up like a jewel against the night sky. Cars lined the circular drive, and she could see guests in formal wear making their way toward the entrance where photographers had set up to capture arrivals. Last chance to change your mind, Victor said quietly. Lena thought about her small room musum in the servants' wing. She thought about the careful invisibility she'd cultivated for 3 years. She thought about running, always hiding, always looking over her shoulder. And then she thought about what Daniela had said. You walk into that wedding like you own the room. No, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. I'm ready. Victor's smile this time was genuine. Then let's give them something to talk about. The car stopped at the entrance. The driver opened Victor's door, and he stepped out first, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. Then he turned, extending his hand to Lena. She took it and let him help her from the car. The moment her heels touched the stone driveway, she heard it. The subtle shift in conversation, the sudden hush that rolled through the crowd of arriving guests like a wave. Victor didn't seem to notice or care. He tucked Lena's hand into the crook of his arm and started toward the entrance with the same measured, confident stride he used everywhere. But Lena could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her, could hear the whispers starting to spread. Who is she? That's not the Castellano daughter. Where did Victor Moretti find her? Is that his housemaid? Victor's hand covered hers briefly, a subtle gesture of reassurance. Ignore them. Eyes forward. They passed through the entrance into a grand foyer where a string quartet played and white-gloved waiters circulated with champagne. The interior of the palazzo was even more impressive than the exterior. Vaulted ceilings, marble floors, and crystal chandeliers that cast prismatic light across everything. And everywhere, people stared. A woman in a stunning red gown actually stopped mid-sentence to watch them pass. A group of men in tuxedos paused their conversation to follow Lena with their eyes. Even the waiters seemed to slow their circulation, trying to catch a glimpse of Victor Moretti's mysterious date. Victor, a voice called out, and a man who looked like a younger, softer version of Victor approached with a broad smile. Brother, you made it. Antonio, Victor embraced him briefly. Congratulations. Where's your bride? Getting final touches from her stylist. She's nervous. Antonio's eyes shifted to Lena, and his smile widened with genuine warmth. And who is this vision you've brought to my wedding? Lena Hart, Victor said simply. Lena, my brother Antonio. It's a pleasure to meet you, Lena said, offering her hand. Antonio took it and, to her surprise, raised it to his lips in a courtly gesture. The pleasure is entirely mine. Victor's been holding out on us. I had no idea he'd been keeping such beauty to himself. Antonio, don't harass my date before the ceremony even starts. But Victor's tone was amused. I'm not harassing. I'm appreciating. There's a difference. Antonio winked at Lena. You'll have to tell me how you managed to convince my notoriously private brother to bring you to a family event. That's a feat worthy of a medal. Before Lena could respond, a sharp voice cut through the pleasantries. Victor Moretti, bringing a date? I never thought I'd see the day. The woman who approached was stunning in that calculated, expensive way that spoke of personal trainers, elite salons, and surgical enhancement. Her blonde hair was swept up in an elaborate style, and her dress probably cost more than Lena made in 6 months. But it was her eyes that caught Lena's attention, cold, assessing, and already hostile. Isabella. Victor's tone went carefully neutral. You look well. And you look surprising. Isabella's gaze raked over Lena with obvious disdain. I don't believe we've met. Isabella Castellano. Lena Hart. Hart, I don't recognize the name. Isabella's smile was as sharp as broken glass. Are you new to the city? It was a trap, Lena realized. Any answer would reveal information Isabella could use. I've been here a few years. In what capacity? Isabella. Victor's voice carried a warning. Lena is my guest. That's all the introduction you need. Of course. How rude of me to be curious about the mysterious woman on your arm. But Isabella's eyes had already dismissed Lena as unimportant. She turned her attention back to Victor. We should talk later, about the Mitchell property deal. I have information you'll find useful. Then you can send it through proper channels. Victor, really, we've known each other too long for this formality. Isabella placed her hand on Victor's arm with casual familiarity. Surely you can spare me a few minutes later. I'm here for my brother's wedding, not business. Since when do you separate the two? Isabella's laugh was practiced and hollow. Fine. Enjoy your evening with your guest. I'm sure we'll see each other later. She swept away in a cloud of expensive perfume, but Lena could feel the woman's eyes on her from across the room. Ex-girlfriend? Lena asked quietly. Business associate with aspirations that exceed her prospects, Victor said dryly. Don't let her rattle you. Isabella Castellano plays power games for sport. It's all she knows. She looked at me like I was an insect. Good. It means she underestimated you. That's always useful. Antonio laughed. I like her, Victor. She's got sense. He glanced toward the main ballroom. I should go check on Carmen. Ceremony starts in 20 minutes. Find your seats. You're at the family table. As Antonio walked away, Lena felt the full weight of what that meant settle on her shoulders. The family table. Not just attending the wedding, but seated with the Moretti family. The message that sent was clear and unmistakable. The family table, she whispered. You're my date. Where else would you sit? Victor guided her toward the ballroom. Come on, let's find our table before the ceremony starts. The ballroom was a masterpiece of wedding excess. White flowers covered every surface, crystal and silver gleamed in the candlelight, and the ceiling had been draped with fabric that made the entire space feel like the inside of a cloud. Round tables ringed the perimeter, leaving a large dance floor in the center, and at the far end, an arch of white roses marked where the ceremony would take place. The family table was front and center, and as Victor led Lena toward it, she could feel every eye in the room tracking their progress. An older woman was already seated, elegant, silver-haired, with the kind of posture that spoke of finishing schools and old money. Her eyes tracked Lena's approach with sharp intelligence. Victor, she said, her voice carrying the same authoritative tone Victor used. You're late. The traffic was terrible, Mother. Victor pulled out a chair for Lena before taking his own seat beside her. Lena Hart, my mother, Francesca Moretti. Francesca's gaze swept over Lena in a single assessing look that somehow took in everything about her in seconds. Hart. I don't know the family. There's no family to know, Lena said, keeping her voice steady. I'm not from your social circle, Mrs. Moretti. That much is obvious. What's less obvious is why my son chose you as his date for his brother's wedding. Francesca's tone wasn't hostile exactly, but it wasn't warm either. Victor doesn't make social choices. He makes strategic ones. So what's the strategy here? Mother, Victor's voice carried a warning. It's a fair question. Francesca turned her attention to Victor. You've turned down a dozen perfectly suitable women over the years, women from good families with useful connections, and now you show up with someone no one's ever heard of. Forgive my curiosity. Lena is my guest, and she'll be treated with respect. That's not negotiable. The temperature at the table seemed to drop several degrees. Francesca and Victor stared at each other across the space, and Lena could see decades of complicated family dynamics playing out in that single exchange. Finally, Francesca inclined her head slightly. Of course. Any guest of yours is welcome. She turned to Lena. I apologize if my questions seemed invasive, Miss Hart. I'm protective of my family. I understand completely, Mrs. Moretti. Please call me Francesca. The older woman's expression softened fractionally. And try to relax. The ceremony is about to begin, and Antonio would be disappointed if his wedding turned into a battlefield. Music swelled from the string orchestra, signaling the start of the ceremony. Lena took a breath, and tried to do exactly what Francesca suggested. Relax. But it was impossible with so many eyes on her, so many whispers following her every move. Victor's hand found hers under the table, his fingers interlacing with hers in a gesture that was both comforting and possessive. "Breathe," he murmured, so quietly only she could hear. "You're doing fine." The ceremony was beautiful in that orchestrated, expensive way that society weddings always were. Antonio looked genuinely happy, his bride Carmen was radiant, and the vows they exchanged seemed heartfelt despite the enormous audience. But Lena couldn't fully focus on the romance of the moment because she could feel the weight of scrutiny pressing down on her from every direction. When the ceremony concluded and guests began to move toward the reception tables, Victor stood and offered Lena his arm again. "The hard part's over," he said. "The ceremony was the hard part?" "No, the introduction was the hard part. Now they've seen you, they've made their judgments, and we can actually enjoy the evening." But as they moved through the crowd toward the reception area, Lena caught sight of a face that made her blood turn to ice. It was impossible. He couldn't be here. She'd been so careful, so cautious. 3 years of building a new life, of staying invisible, of making sure the past couldn't find her. And there he was, across the ballroom, talking with a group of men in expensive suits. Marcus Vega, the man she'd witnessed commit murder. The criminal boss who'd spent 2 years looking for the woman who'd seen him kill a federal agent in cold blood. The man who would kill her the moment he recognized her face. Lena's breath stopped in her throat. The champagne glass in her hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy, and the emerald dress that had made her feel transformed moments ago now felt like a spotlight, drawing attention she desperately didn't want. Marcus Vega hadn't changed much in 3 years. His dark hair was touched with more gray at the temples, and he'd added some weight that expensive tailoring tried to hide, but his face was exactly as she remembered. Sharp features, cold eyes, and that cruel mouth that had smiled while he'd put 2 bullets into a man's chest. Victor's hand tightened on her arm. "Lena, what's wrong?" She couldn't speak, couldn't move. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. She watched Marcus laugh at something one of the men said, watched him take a drink from his glass, watched him scan the room with the casual arrogance of a predator who believed himself untouchable. "Lena." Victor's voice was sharper now, cutting through her panic. "Look at me!" She tore her gaze away from Marcus and met Victor's eyes. The controlled mask he usually wore had shifted, revealing something predatory underneath. He'd gone completely still in that dangerous way she'd seen once before, when a business associate had made the mistake of threatening someone Victor protected. "Who is he?" Victor asked quietly. Don't lie to me. Not now." His voice remained low, but there was steel underneath. "The man across the room, the one who just made you look like you've seen your own death. Who is he?" Lena's mind raced. She could lie, could deflect, could try to push through the evening and pray Marcus didn't recognize her. But Victor's eyes told her he wouldn't accept anything less than the truth, and some part of her, the part that had been running and hiding for 3 years, was exhausted from carrying the weight of secrets alone. "His name is Marcus Vega," she whispered, "and 3 years ago I watched him kill a federal agent in cold blood." Victor's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air around them. "And he doesn't know you saw." He knew someone saw. He spent 2 years looking for the witness. That's why I came here, why I took the housemaid position, why I've stayed invisible. If he recognizes me, he won't. Victor's hand moved to her lower back, a gesture that looked casual but felt protective. "We're leaving. Now." "Victor, I can't just—" "Yes, you can. We're walking out of this ballroom, getting in my car and removing you from his sight before he has a chance to place your face." Victor was already moving, guiding her toward the nearest exit with the same measured confidence he used for everything. "Stay close to me. Don't look back at him. If anyone stops us, let me handle it." They made it perhaps 10 feet before Isabella Castellano stepped directly into their path, her smile bright and false. "Leaving so soon? The reception hasn't even started." Her eyes glittered with malicious curiosity. "Is something wrong?" "Family matter," Victor said smoothly, trying to move around her, but Isabella shifted with them, blocking their path again. "How strange. I just saw your mother, and she seemed perfectly fine. Her gaze slid to Lena. Perhaps your date isn't feeling well. The pressure of being on display can be overwhelming for those who aren't accustomed to it. Isabella, move! Victor's voice dropped to something dangerous. Or what? You'll make a scene at your brother's wedding? Isabella's smile sharpened. I thought you had more control than that, Victor. Unless this girl really has gotten under your skin more than I realized. Over Isabella's shoulder, Lena saw Marcus turn their direction. His gaze swept the crowd, and in seconds, maybe less, it would land on them. On her. Isabella? Lena spoke before she could think better of it, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. You're absolutely right. I'm not feeling well. The excitement of the evening has been overwhelming, so if you'll excuse us, Victor is being kind enough to help me get some air. The direct acknowledgement of her own inadequacy seemed to satisfy something in Isabella. Her smile turned genuine, if condescending. Of course. How thoughtful of Victor to be so attentive. I hope you feel better soon. She stepped aside and Victor immediately resumed their progress toward the exit. But they'd lost precious seconds, and Lena could feel Marcus's attention sweeping closer like a searchlight. Don't look, Victor murmured. Keep walking. Almost there. They were 5 feet from the exit when she heard it. Victor Moretti. The voice was smooth, cultured, and carried the kind of authority that expected to be acknowledged. Victor stopped, and Lena felt him exhale slowly, the only sign of frustration he allowed himself. Marcus. Victor turned, positioning himself slightly in front of Lena. I didn't realize you'd be here. Antonio's new wife has connections to my business interests. I wouldn't miss it. Marcus moved closer, and Lena kept her gaze down, studying the marble floor like it held the secrets of the universe. I heard you brought a date. That's unusual for you. Special occasion. Indeed. There was a pause, and Lena could feel Marcus's attention on her like a physical weight. Aren't you going to introduce us? Every muscle in Lena's body went rigid. This was it. The moment when 3 years of running would end. The moment when Marcus Vega would see her face, recognize the witness who'd disappeared, and... She's not feeling well, Victor said, his voice casual but firm. We were just stepping out for some air. That's a shame. I was hoping to meet the woman who finally caught Victor Moretti's attention. Marcus's tone was friendly, but underneath Lena could hear something sharper. Perhaps later, when she's feeling better. Perhaps. Victor's hand pressed against her back, urging her forward, and Lena moved on autopilot. They made it through the exit, down a hallway, and out a side door into the cool night air before her legs finally gave out. Victor caught her before she could fall, his arms steady and strong. Breathe. You're safe. He didn't see your face. He knows something's wrong. He's suspicious. Lena's voice came out shaky. Victor, you don't understand. Marcus Vega doesn't let things go. If he thinks I'm hiding something, then he'll have to go through me to find out what it is. Victor guided her to a stone bench in the garden, helping her sit. And trust me, Lena, that's not a fight he wants to have. You don't know what he's capable of. I know exactly what he's capable of. Marcus Vega runs the East Side Territory, controls half the port operations, and has 3 judges in his pocket. He's dangerous, ruthless, and very good at making problems disappear. Victor crouched in front of her, his eyes level with hers. But I'm better. This isn't your problem. The moment I brought you to this wedding, you became my responsibility. The moment you told me why you were afraid, it became my problem. His hands covered hers, warm and steady. Now tell me everything. The federal agent he killed. Why? Where? And how did you see it? Lena closed her eyes, the memories flooding back with crystal clarity. 3 years ago, I was working at a hotel in Chicago. Night housekeeping. I was cleaning the executive conference room on the 23rd floor when I heard voices. Men arguing. I should have left, should have come back later, but the door was already open and I thought the room was empty. What did you see? 2 men. The federal agent, I found out later his name was Daniel Cooper, was confronting Marcus about weapon shipments. He had evidence, recordings, documents. He told Marcus he had enough to put him away for life, that his operation was finished. Lena's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Marcus just smiled, said that Cooper had made a mistake coming alone, that he should have known better. Then he pulled a gun and shot him, twice, center mass. Cooper was dead before he hit the floor. And Marcus saw you. Not my face. I ran the second the gun fired. I heard him shouting for his men to find the witness, heard them searching the floor. I made it to the service elevator, got out of the hotel, and disappeared that night. Changed my name, moved cities, took the first job I could find that came with housing where I could stay hidden. Victor was quiet for a long moment, processing. The federal investigation went nowhere. How do you know? Because if they'd had a witness, Marcus would be in prison. His expression hardened. You've been carrying this alone for 3 years, running, hiding, looking over your shoulder. What else could I do? Go to the police? Marcus owns half of them. The FBI? Daniel Cooper was FBI, and he still ended up dead. I had no evidence, no recordings, just my word against one of the most powerful criminals in the region. Lena met his eyes. I did the only thing that made sense. I vanished. And now he's 20 feet away from you, at my brother's wedding, and he knows something isn't right. Victor stood, pulling out his phone. We need to leave, now. Not just the wedding, the entire situation. Victor, I can't ask you to You're not asking, I'm deciding. He was already typing something on his phone. My driver is pulling the car around to the east entrance. We're going to walk calmly to that entrance, get in the car, and go somewhere safe while I figure out how to handle this. Handle this how? Marcus Vega isn't someone you can just handle. He has resources, connections. So do I, and unlike Marcus, I don't leave loose ends. Victor extended his hand to her. Trust me, Lena. Can you do that? Could she? She barely knew Victor Moretti beyond his reputation and the 3 years she'd spent cleaning his house. But he'd protected her tonight, believed her story without question, and was offering her a safety she hadn't felt in years. She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. They'd made it halfway across the garden when Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his jaw tightened. What? Lena asked. Marcus is asking Antonio about you, wants to know your name, where you're from, how we met. Terror spiked through her. What did Antonio tell him? Nothing yet. Antonio's protective of family, and you were at the family table. But Marcus is persistent, and Antonio doesn't know why it matters. Victor typed a quick response. I'm telling Antonio you're someone I'm keeping private, that he should deflect any questions. That's going to make Marcus more suspicious, not less. Better suspicious than informed. Victor pocketed his phone and resumed walking. The car should be here by now. But as they rounded the corner toward the east entrance, 3 men in suits stepped out of the shadows. They weren't wearing the formal wedding attire of the other guests. These were working men, the kind who provided security and solved problems for people like Marcus Vega. Mr. Moretti, the largest of the 3, spoke with practiced deference. Mr. Vega would like a word with you, alone. Victor stopped, and Lena felt his entire body shift into something dangerous. Tell Marcus if he wants to speak with me, he can schedule an appointment like everyone else. He was quite insistent, sir. I don't care. We're leaving. The 3 men didn't move from their blocking position. Mr. Vega was also curious about your companion, said she seemed familiar, but he couldn't quite place her face. Asked if we might get a proper introduction. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. Marcus had recognized something, even if not her complete face, and now he was maneuvering to get a better look. My companion is none of Marcus's concern. Victor's voice went cold. And if you 3 don't step aside in the next 5 seconds, you're going to discover exactly why people don't block my path. Mr. Moretti, we're just following orders. 4 seconds. The men exchanged glances. They clearly hadn't expected Victor to push back this hard over a woman none of them recognized. 3. Sir, perhaps if the lady would just... 2. Victor didn't bother counting to 1. He moved with a speed that shocked Lena, his hand shooting out to grab the nearest man's wrist and twist it at an angle that made the man cry out. In the same motion, Victor swept the man's legs and sent him crashing to the ground. The other 2 moved to intervene, but Victor was already stepping back, pulling Lena behind him with one hand while the other went to his jacket. He didn't pull a weapon, but the threat was clear. I said we're leaving. Anyone who tries to stop us answers to me personally. Are we clear? The two men still standing helped their companion to his feet, all three of them reassessing the situation. Whatever Marcus had told them about stopping Victor Moretti, it clearly hadn't included a warning about the man's capacity for sudden violence. "We'll tell Mr. Vega you declined his invitation," the large man said carefully. "You do that." Victor guided Lena past them, moving quickly but not running. The Mercedes was indeed waiting at the east entrance, engine running. Victor opened the door, helped Lena inside, and slid in beside her. "Drive," he told his driver. "Back route, and watch for anyone following." The car pulled away smoothly, and Lena watched through the rear window as the Palazzo estate disappeared into the distance. The entire evening felt surreal. Hours ago she'd been a housemaid, invisible and safe. Now she was fleeing a wedding with Victor Moretti, running from a killer who'd just gotten close enough to become suspicious. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere Marcus can't reach you." Victor was already on his phone again, making calls in rapid succession. "Marco, I need the penthouse prepared. Full security protocol. No, not the estate, the downtown property. And I want the security detail I use for high-value assets. Yes, tonight. I don't care if it's inconvenient. Make it happen." He ended the call and immediately made another. "It's me. I need everything you have on Marcus Vega. Financial, operational, personal, everything. And I need to know who he's been meeting with in the last 3 months, especially anyone connected to Chicago." A pause. "Because he's become my problem, and I don't like having problems I don't understand." Lena watched Victor work, saw the way he shifted from the controlled, measured man she knew to something harder, more dangerous. This was Victor Moretti operating at full capacity, and it was both terrifying and oddly comforting. "I'm sorry," she said quietly when he ended the call. "For what?" "For bringing this into your life. You were just trying to make a point at your brother's wedding, and now you're caught up in something dangerous because of me." Victor turned to look at her, and his expression softened slightly. "Lena, I've been operating in dangerous circles since I was 16 years old. Marcus Vega is a problem, but he's not an unprecedented one. And you didn't bring this into my life. I chose to bring you to that wedding. I chose to ask questions when I saw you were afraid. I chose to protect you when I understood why. Those were my decisions. But you could have just let me go, sent me away, stayed out of it." "I could have." He held her gaze. "I didn't want to." The words hung in the air between them, carrying weight Lena wasn't quite ready to examine. She looked away, focusing on the city lights streaming past the window. The car took them downtown to a high-rise that Lena recognized as one of the most exclusive addresses in the city. The driver pulled into an underground garage, and Victor led her to a private elevator that required both a keycard and a fingerprint scan to operate. "This is the property you mentioned?" Lena asked as the elevator climbed. "The penthouse. I use it for meetings that require privacy, sometimes for housing people who need protection." The elevator doors opened directly into a sprawling apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "Make yourself at home. You'll be safe here." The space was stunning, modern, luxurious, but somehow still comfortable. Lena walked to the windows, looking down at the glittering city below. From up here, the danger felt distant, almost abstract. "Victor." She turned to find him watching her with that same intense focus he'd had in the library the night before. "What happens now?" "Now I make sure Marcus Vega understands that you're under my protection, and that coming after you means coming after me. And if he doesn't care? If he decides you're worth the risk? Then he'll learn a very expensive lesson about what happens when people threaten what's mine." Victor moved closer, and Lena could see the absolute certainty in his eyes. "I meant what I said earlier, Lena. You became my responsibility the moment I brought you to that wedding. I don't abandon my responsibilities. I'm not your responsibility, you're not just anything." He cut her off gently. "You're a woman who's been running for 3 years because she had the courage to do the right thing at the wrong time. You're someone who's survived through intelligence and determination when most people would have crumbled. And tonight, you stood beside me at that wedding and handled yourself with more grace than half the people who've been training for those situations their entire lives." Lena's breath caught. No one had seen her that way in years. She'd been invisible for so long that she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be truly seen. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just accept that you're not alone anymore. Victor's phone buzzed and he glanced at the screen. That's Marco. Security detail is in place. No one gets to this floor without going through 4 levels of clearance and 3 armed guards. Isn't that excessive? Marcus Vega killed a federal agent and walked away clean. Excessive is the only appropriate response. Victor moved toward the door. I need to make some more calls, handle a few things. There are clothes in the master bedroom that should fit you. I keep a selection here for situations like this. Get some rest if you can. Where will you be? The office down the hall. I'll be here all night and the security team is on full alert. You're safe, Lena. I promise you that. After he left, Lena stood in the vast living room for a long moment, trying to process everything that had happened. This morning she'd been a housemaid. Tonight she was hiding in a penthouse under the protection of one of the most powerful men in the city because a killer from her past had resurfaced at the worst possible moment. She found the master bedroom and discovered Victor had undersold the clothing selection. There was an entire walk-in closet filled with women's clothes in various sizes, all high-end brands with the tags still attached. She chose simple leggings and a soft sweater, changing out of the emerald dress that now felt like evidence of the strangest night of her life. Sleep seemed impossible, but exhaustion eventually pulled her under. She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee brewing. Victor was in the kitchen, still wearing his tuxedo pants and dress shirt from the night before, though he'd removed the jacket and tie. He looked tired but alert, and judging by the coffee pot, he'd been up for a while. "Morning," he said when he noticed her. "Coffee? Please." He poured her a cup, and Lena noticed the documents spread across the kitchen island. Files, photographs, what looked like financial records. Marcus Vega's entire operation, Victor said, following her gaze. I've spent the last 6 hours learning everything there is to know about the man who wants to find you. And he's powerful, connected, and ruthless. But he's also overextended financially, has been making enemies in the Chicago territory, and recently lost a major shipment that cost him millions. He's vulnerable in ways he doesn't realize yet. Lena sipped her coffee, the warmth helping to chase away the lingering fear from the night before. What does that mean for us? It means I have leverage, and leverage is something I know how to use. Victor's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen. His expression hardened. It also means Marcus is making moves faster than I anticipated. What kind of moves? He's asking around about you, called in favors with people who owe him, started making inquiries about a woman matching your description who might have been in Chicago 3 years ago. Well, Victor set down his phone. He's not just suspicious anymore, he's actively hunting. Terror spiked through Lena again. Then I need to disappear. Leave the city, change my name again. No, Victor's voice was firm. Running didn't work the first time, and it won't work now. Marcus has resources across multiple states. If he's decided you're important enough to hunt, he won't stop until he finds you. The only way to end this is to make him stop looking. And how do we do that? Victor's smile was cold and calculating. We make him realize that finding you would cost him everything he's built. We turn his hunt into his worst mistake, and we do it in a way that ensures he never comes after you again. Victor, that sounds dangerous. It is dangerous, but so is running for the rest of your life. He moved around the island to stand in front of her. Lena, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She thought about the 3 years she'd spent running, always looking over her shoulder, never building connections or putting down roots because at any moment she might need to disappear again. She thought about Marcus Vega's cold eyes and cruel smile, about the federal agent who'd died trying to bring him to justice. And she thought about Victor Moretti, who had protected her without hesitation, who had believed her story without question, who was offering her something she hadn't had in years, a chance to stop running. Yes, she said finally, I trust you. Good. Because we're about to make Marcus Vega's life very complicated. Victor's plan unfolded over the next 72 hours with the precision of a military operation. Lena watched from the penthouse as he orchestrated moves she didn't fully understand, making calls that lasted minutes and resulted in significant shifts in Marcus Vega's world. The first domino fell on Monday morning when 3 of Marcus's port operations were suddenly subjected to intensive customs inspections. Victor made the call while drinking his second cup of coffee, his voice casual as he spoke to someone he addressed only as Commissioner. "I'm not asking for anything illegal," Victor said into the phone, his eyes on the financial documents spread before him. "Just thorough enforcement of existing regulations. Marcus Vega's operations had been cutting corners for years. Time someone looked closely at his paperwork." He ended the call and glanced at Lena, who was curled up on the sofa with her own coffee. "That'll tie up his cash flow for at least a week. Make him scramble to cover losses he wasn't expecting. Won't he know it was you? He'll suspect, but suspicion isn't proof, and I've been careful to use channels that can't be traced back directly." Victor returned his attention to the documents. "The key is to apply pressure from multiple directions simultaneously. Make him defensive, reactive. People make mistakes when they're scrambling." The second domino fell that afternoon when Marcus's primary lawyer was suddenly indicted on charges of tax evasion. Lena watched the news report on the penthouse television, recognizing the attorney's face from the photographs Victor had shown her. "You did that?" she asked. "I provided information to people who were already investigating him. The evidence was real. I just made sure it reached the right hands at the right time." Victor's expression remained neutral. Marcus relied on Robert Chen to insulate him from legal exposure. Without Chen, Marcus has to use less capable attorneys. That means vulnerabilities. This feels like chess. It is chess, except the pieces are people, and the stakes are considerably higher than a game. Victor's phone buzzed with an incoming message. He read it and allowed himself a small smile. And Marcus just made his first significant mistake. He turned the phone toward Lena, showing her a photograph. It depicted Marcus Vega standing outside a downtown building, talking intensely with two men Lena didn't recognize. "Who are they?" she asked. "Chicago associates. Marcus called in favors, brought in people from his old territory to help with the search for you." Victor's smile widened. "Which means he's officially operating outside his authorized territory without clearing it with the people who regulate such things. That's going to make some very powerful people very unhappy with him." Lena felt a chill despite the warmth of the penthouse. "You're destroying his entire operation." "I'm creating consequences for his decision to hunt you. There's a difference." Victor pocketed his phone. "Marcus Vega has operated for years with minimal oversight because he was careful, controlled, and didn't make waves. The moment he started making aggressive moves to find a witness from 3 years ago, he became reckless. I'm just helping that recklessness catch up with him. What if he realizes I'm the catalyst? What if that makes him more determined? Then he'll have to go through me to reach you, and that's a fight he'll lose." Victor's certainty was absolute. "Lena, I need you to understand something. In my world, protection isn't a passive act. It's not about hiding you away and hoping threats disappear. It's about making those threats regret ever targeting you in the first place." The intensity in his voice made Lena's breath catch. She'd seen Victor operate over the past 3 days with ruthless efficiency, dismantling Marcus's world piece by piece. But this was the first time she'd heard him explicitly articulate the philosophy behind his actions. "You're doing all this for me," she said quietly. "Someone you barely know." "I know enough. I know you're brave enough to witness a murder and smart enough to survive the aftermath. I know you've lived in my house for 3 years without ever asking for special treatment or trying to leverage proximity to power. I know you handled a wedding full of sharks with more grace than most people born into that world." Victor's gaze held hers. "And I know that when I asked you to trust me, you did. That means something." Before Lena could respond, the penthouse intercom buzzed. Victor moved to answer it, listening for a moment before his expression darkened. "Send him up." "Who?" Lena asked, tension immediately coiling in her stomach. "Antonio, my brother." Victor's tone was carefully neutral. "He wants to talk about what happened at his wedding." Antonio arrived moments later, still dressed in casual clothes that probably cost more than Lena's monthly salary had been. He looked stressed, his usual easy charm replaced with concern. "Victor, what the hell is going on?" Antonio demanded the moment he stepped into the penthouse. "Marcus Vega has been calling me non-stop asking about your date, and now I'm hearing rumors that you're making moves against his operations. Did something happen at my wedding?" "Nothing that concerns you." "Like hell it doesn't concern me. It was my wedding, Victor, and now Marcus is implying that your mysterious date, is somehow connected to his business interests from years ago. Antonio's gaze shifted to Lena. I need to know what I've been pulled into. Victor's jaw tightened. You weren't pulled into anything. This is between Marcus and me. Except it started at my wedding, which means Carmen's family is asking questions, and people in Marcus's circle are wondering if I was part of whatever you're orchestrating. Antonio ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I deserve to know what's happening. Lena stood, drawing both men's attention. It's my fault. I'm the reason Marcus is asking questions, and I'm the reason Victor is taking action against him. Lena, you don't have to, Victor started. Yes, I do. She turned to Antonio. 3 years ago, I witnessed Marcus Vega murder a federal agent. I've been hiding ever since, and seeing him at your wedding triggered everything. Victor has been protecting me from Marcus's attempts to identify and locate me. Antonio stared at her for a long moment, processing. Then he looked at his brother. A federal agent. Marcus killed a federal agent, and Lena saw it. Yes. And you brought her to my wedding knowing Marcus would be there. I didn't know Marcus would be there. That was an unwelcome surprise. Victor's voice was steady. But yes, I brought Lena knowing she had a dangerous past. I also brought her knowing I would protect her from any threats that emerged. Antonio was quiet, his expression cycling through several emotions before settling on something that looked like resignation. You could have told me. I could have, but the less you knew, the safer you were. I'm a Moretti, Victor. I stopped being safe the day I was born into this family. Antonio moved to the window, looking out at the city. What do you need from me? The question seemed to surprise Victor. Nothing. This is my problem to handle. Wrong. If Marcus is making moves that affect our family's reputation, it's all of our problem. Antonio turned back to them. I may not run the business side like you do, but I'm not useless. And if there's a way I can help protect Lena from a man who kills federal agents, I want to do it. Lena felt something warm unfold in her chest. She'd expected anger, blame, resentment. Instead, Antonio was offering support. There is one thing, Victor said after a moment. Marcus has been using his connection to your wedding as social leverage, implying that the Moretti family wouldn't have invited him if there were serious concerns about his operations. If you were to publicly distance yourself from him, it would undermine that leverage. Consider it done. I'll make sure people know that Marcus was Carmen's family's guest, not mine, and that I have no business relationship with him. Antonio looked at Lena. I'm sorry you got caught up in this, and I'm sorry my wedding became the catalyst for your past catching up with you. You have nothing to apologize for, Lena said. This was always going to happen eventually. At least this way, I have help dealing with it. After Antonio left, Victor returned to his documents and phone calls, but Lena could see the tension in his shoulders. The conversation with his brother had cost him something, though she wasn't sure what. You don't like involving your family, she observed. I don't like putting them at risk. Victor didn't look up from the financial report he was reading. Antonio lives a different life than I do. He married for love, builds legitimate businesses, stays away from the darker aspects of our family's operations. I prefer to keep it that way. But he offered to help. Because he's loyal. Doesn't mean I have to accept the offer. Victor finally met her eyes. You asked earlier why I'm doing all this for someone I barely know. The truth is, I know what it's like to be caught between impossible choices, to have your safety depend on decisions other people make. I spent my childhood watching my father navigate those waters, and I swore when I took over his operations that I would never leave people vulnerable if I had the power to protect them. It was the most personal thing Victor had shared with her, and Lena found herself wanting to know more. What happened to your father? He made too many enemies and not enough allies. Someone he trusted betrayed him, and he paid for that trust with his life. Victor's expression hardened. I was 19, had to step into his role overnight, prove I was strong enough to hold his territory, smart enough to avoid his mistakes. That's a lot of pressure for a 19-year-old. It was necessary. The alternative was watching everything he built crumble and leaving my family vulnerable. Victor set down the report. I learned fast that in this world, you're either predator or prey. There's no middle ground, no neutral territory. So I became very good at being the predator. Is that what you're doing with Marcus, being a predator? I'm being what the situation requires. Marcus chose to hunt you. I'm making sure he regrets that choice thoroughly enough that he never makes it again. The third domino fell Wednesday evening when Marcus's primary warehouse was raided by federal agents investigating weapons trafficking. Lena watched the news coverage with a mixture of satisfaction and unease as officers led away 3 of Marcus's top lieutenants in handcuffs. You arranged that too? She asked. I provided anonymous tips about shipments I knew were coming through that location. The rest was legitimate law enforcement doing their job. Victor's attention remained fixed on his laptop screen. Marcus just lost his main distribution hub and 3 key operators. That's going to create chaos in his organization. How much longer can this go on before he retaliates? He's already retaliating, or trying to. Victor turned the laptop toward her, showing her a series of messages and reports. Marcus has been attempting to hit back at my operations, but he's being sloppy, desperate. Every move he makes creates more evidence of illegal activity, which gives me more ammunition to use against him. Lena studied the messages, seeing the pattern Victor described. Marcus was scrambling, making increasingly aggressive moves that were backfiring spectacularly. He's going to figure out eventually that you're the one orchestrating all this. He already knows. He just can't prove it, and more importantly, he can't stop it. Victor closed the laptop. The question isn't whether Marcus knows I'm behind his problems. The question is what he's willing to risk to make them stop. The answer came Thursday morning in the form of a phone call. Victor's expression shifted as he listened to whoever was on the other end, and Lena saw his hand tighten around the phone. When? He asked. A pause. How many? Another pause, longer this time. Keep them there. I'm on my way. He ended the call and immediately began making preparations to leave, moving with controlled urgency that set Lena's nerves on edge. What happened? Marcus sent people to the estate. 6 men, armed, demanding to see me. Victor's voice was clipped, professional. My security team has them contained, but this is an escalation I need to address personally. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. You stay here where it's safe. Victor, if Marcus is making aggressive moves, it's because of me. I should be there. Which is exactly why you shouldn't be there. Victor pulled on his jacket. Marcus is hoping to draw you out, force a confrontation on his terms. I'm not giving him that satisfaction. Then what are you giving him? Victor's smile was cold. A very clear understanding of what happens when people threaten my household. He left, and Lena was alone in the penthouse with her thoughts and the security team Victor had stationed outside. She paced the living room, unable to settle, imagining worst-case scenarios. What if Marcus's men overwhelmed Victor's security? What if this was a trap? What if she'd just sent Victor into a situation that could get him killed? The minutes crawled past with agonizing slowness. Lena tried to distract herself with television, with reading, with anything that would keep her mind occupied. Nothing worked. She kept checking her phone, hoping for updates that didn't come. Finally, after nearly 2 hours, her phone buzzed with a message from Victor. Situation handled. On my way back. We need to talk. The words should have been reassuring, but something about the tone made Lena's stomach clench. When Victor finally returned to the penthouse, she could see the tension radiating from him in waves. What happened? She asked immediately. Victor poured himself a drink before answering, and Lena noticed his hands were completely steady despite whatever he'd just dealt with. Marcus's men delivered a message. He knows you're the witness from Chicago. He knows I'm protecting you, and he's willing to make a deal. What kind of deal? He wants you. Specifically, he wants you turned over to him within 48 hours. In exchange, he'll cease all attempts to retaliate against my operations and will leave the city permanently. Victor's eyes were hard. He also made it very clear what would happen if I refused. Lena's breath caught. He threatened you. He threatened everyone I care about, my family, my associates, anyone connected to my operations. He's desperate enough now to burn everything down if he doesn't get what he wants. Victor drained his drink and set the glass down with controlled precision. He also provided proof that you witnessed the murder. Surveillance footage from the hotel that shows you entering and leaving the conference room minutes before his security team arrived. It's not perfect, but it's enough to confirm you were there. The news hit Lena like a physical blow. For 3 years, she'd hoped that Marcus didn't have concrete evidence, that his search was based on paranoia rather than proof. Now that hope was gone. So he wins, she said quietly. He has evidence, he has leverage, and he's willing to destroy everything to get to me. He thinks he wins. Victor moved closer, and Lena could see something dangerous in his expression. But Marcus made a critical mistake. He assumed that his threats would make me back down, that I would choose my operations over one person. He was wrong. Victor, I can't let you sacrifice everything you've built because of me. You're not letting me do anything. I'm making a choice. The same choice I made when I brought you to that wedding, when I decided to protect you, when I started taking apart Marcus's operation piece by piece. His hands came to rest on her shoulders, steady and warm. Lena, I told you, protection isn't passive. This is what active protection looks like. This is what it means when I say you're under my protection. But your family is already protected. I moved them to secure locations the moment Marcus made his threats. My mother is at our property in the mountains with a full security detail. Antonio and Carmen are staying with her. Every person Marcus could use as leverage is beyond his reach. Victor's gaze held hers. The only person I'm worried about is you. Lena felt tears sting her eyes. No one had worried about her, truly worried about her safety and well-being in 3 years. She'd been alone with her fear for so long that having someone stand between her and danger felt almost surreal. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely steady. Now we end this. Not by hiding, not by running, not by giving Marcus what he wants. We end it by making him realize that coming after you was the biggest mistake of his life. Victor's expression was absolutely certain. I have something Marcus wants desperately, and tomorrow I'm going to use it to make sure he never threatens you again. What do you have? Evidence. Real, concrete, irrefutable evidence of every illegal transaction Marcus has made in the last 5 years. Financial records, communication logs, witness statements from people in his organization who've agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. Victor's smile was sharp. I've been building this case since the moment you told me about Daniel Cooper. I just needed Marcus to be desperate enough to make mistakes, reckless enough to expose himself. Lena stared at him. You've been planning this the entire time. I've been preparing for this contingency, yes. I knew Marcus wouldn't back down easily, that he'd escalate. So I made sure I had enough ammunition to end the fight permanently when the time came. Victor pulled out his phone, showing her a series of files. Tomorrow morning, copies of all this evidence go to the FBI, the district attorney, and 3 major newspapers. By noon, Marcus Vega will be facing federal charges that will put him away for the rest of his life. And he'll know it came from you. He'll know. But by then it won't matter. He'll be too busy trying to avoid life in prison to worry about revenge. Victor pocketed his phone. This ends tomorrow, Lena. One way or another. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay in the master bedroom of the penthouse, staring at the ceiling and trying to process everything that had happened in less than a week. 7 days ago, she'd been invisible, safe in her careful anonymity. Now she was at the center of a war between 2 powerful men, and tomorrow would determine whether she'd finally be free or forever running. She found Victor in his office, still awake despite the late hour. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway, his expression softening slightly. Can't sleep? He asked. Too many thoughts. Lena moved into the room, drawn by the quiet companionship of his presence. Are you sure about tomorrow? Once you release that evidence, there's no taking it back. I'm sure. Marcus made his choice when he threatened my family. This is the consequence. Victor gestured to the chair across from his desk. But I need to know you're sure. Once this happens, your name will likely come out as the witness. You'll have to testify, probably face cross-examination from Marcus's lawyers. Your anonymity is over. Lena had been thinking about exactly that. For 3 years, invisibility had been her shield. Tomorrow, that shield would be gone, and she'd have to face the world, and Marcus Vega, directly. I'm tired of hiding, she said finally. I'm tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of letting what I witnessed define my entire existence. If testifying means Marcus goes to prison, If it means other people he's hurt get justice, then yes, I'm sure. Victor studied her for a long moment. You're braver than you think, or more desperate for this to be over. Bravery and desperation often look the same from the outside. Victor leaned back in his chair. Lena, I need to tell you something. When this is over, when Marcus is in custody, and the immediate danger has passed, you'll have choices to make. About where you go, what you do, who you want to be without fear driving your decisions. I haven't thought that far ahead. You should. Because you're not going back to being a housemaid in my estate. That life is over, whether we want it to be or not. His expression was serious. But I want you to know that whatever you decide, you'll have resources. Financial support, legal protection, connections if you need them. Consider it compensation for the disruption I caused by bringing you to that wedding. You didn't cause the disruption, Marcus did. I created the circumstances that forced the confrontation. I'm responsible for that. Victor paused. I'm also responsible for showing you that you're more than what you've been hiding as. The woman I've watched this week, the one who faced down Isabella Castellano, who handled my mother's interrogation, who trusted me enough to let me fight for her, that woman deserves better than invisibility. Lena felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with being truly seen. Victor Moretti, the man everyone feared, saw her. Not as a victim, not as a liability, but as someone worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth believing in. What if I don't know who that woman is yet? She asked quietly. Then you'll have time to find out. Without Marcus Vega hanging over your head, without fear dictating every choice, you'll have the freedom to discover who Lena Hart really is. The promise in his words felt like a gift, but it also felt dangerous in a completely different way than Marcus's threats. Because somewhere in the chaos of the past week, Lena had started to care about Victor Moretti in ways that went beyond gratitude or relief. She'd seen the man behind the reputation, the one who protected his family fiercely, who kept his word absolutely, who operated with a code that was ruthless but never cruel. And that terrified her almost as much as Marcus Vega had. You should get some rest, Victor said, breaking the moment. Tomorrow is going to be intense. Lena nodded and stood, but paused at the door. Victor, thank you for all of it. You don't have to thank me for doing what's right. Maybe not. But I'm thanking you anyway. She went back to the bedroom and finally managed to sleep, her last conscious thought that tomorrow, one way or another, everything would change. Morning came too quickly. Lena woke to sunlight streaming through the penthouse windows and the sound of Victor's voice coming from the office down the hall. She couldn't make out the words, but his tone was clipped and professional, the voice of a man executing a plan he'd carefully constructed. She found him an hour later in the kitchen, dressed in a charcoal suit that made him look every inch the powerful executive he was. Multiple phones sat on the counter beside him, and his laptop was open to what looked like legal documents. Coffee's fresh, he said without looking up, and there's breakfast if you're hungry. Lena poured herself coffee but couldn't imagine eating. Her stomach was tight with anticipation and anxiety. Have you sent the evidence yet? At 6 this morning. FBI received their copies first, then the district attorney's office, then the newspapers. Victor finally looked up, and Lena could see the controlled tension in his eyes. By now, federal agents are probably already moving to secure warrants. Marcus will be in custody before noon. And his threat about your family? Empty words from a desperate man. He doesn't have the time or resources to act on those threats anymore. His entire organization is about to implode. Victor's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen. That's my attorney. The FBI wants to arrange a meeting with you this afternoon. They'll want your statement about what you witnessed 3 years ago. The reality of it hit Lena hard. This was actually happening. After 3 years of hiding, she was going to walk into an FBI office and tell them everything she'd seen. She was going to identify Marcus Vega as a murderer and provide testimony that would help put him away forever. I'm ready, she said, and was surprised to find she meant it. Victor studied her face for a long moment. You don't have to do this alone. I'll have my attorney present, and I can be there if you want the support. Won't that look suspicious? Like you're trying to influence my testimony? I'm already implicated in this situation. My fingerprints are all over the evidence that's being delivered to federal authorities. The FBI isn't stupid. They know I orchestrated this, but they also know that Marcus Vega is a bigger fish than interdepartmental politics. Victor moved closer. So yes, I can be there. The question is whether you want me there. Lena thought about it. Part of her wanted to prove she could handle this independently, that she was strong enough to face the consequences of her choices without leaning on Victor's support. But another part of her, the part that had spent 3 years alone with her fear, desperately wanted someone in her corner. Yes, she said finally. I want you there. Something shifted in Victor's expression, a warmth that softened the hard edges he usually presented to the world. Then I'll be there. The morning passed in a blur of preparation. Victor's attorney, a sharp woman named Rachel Morrison, who looked like she could argue down a Supreme Court justice, arrived at 10 to brief Lena on what to expect from the FBI interview. She was thorough, professional, and surprisingly kind. The agents are going to push you on details, Rachel explained, sitting across from Lena in the penthouse living room. They'll want to know everything you remember about that night, what you saw, what you heard, why you ran, where you've been since. Some of their questions will feel invasive or accusatory. That's normal. They're building a case, and they need to know your testimony will hold up under cross-examination. What if I can't remember everything perfectly? It was 3 years ago. Then you say you don't remember. Never guess, never embellish, never try to fill in gaps with assumptions. Rachel's gaze was steady. The truth is your strongest asset here, Lena. Marcus Vega killed a federal agent. That fact alone is going to drive this investigation. Your testimony corroborates evidence they already have. You're not the entire case. You're one piece of a much larger puzzle. What about Marcus's evidence? The surveillance footage that shows me at the hotel? Victor already provided the FBI with that footage, along with context about how and why Marcus obtained it. It actually helps your credibility. It proves you were there, which supports your testimony. Rachel glanced at Victor, who was standing by the windows. The FBI is going to want to know about your relationship with Victor, why he's protecting you, what his motivations are, whether there's any arrangement that might compromise your testimony. There's no arrangement, Lena said firmly. Victor has been helping me because Marcus threatened me, that's all. That's all you need to say. Keep it simple. Keep it honest. Rachel stood. We should leave soon. The FBI wants to meet at 2, and traffic downtown can be unpredictable. The FBI field office was located in a nondescript building that looked more like a corporate headquarters than a law enforcement facility. Victor's driver dropped them at the entrance, and Rachel led the way through security with the confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times before. 2 agents met them in a conference room on the 4th floor. The lead agent, a man in his 40s with graying hair and intelligent eyes, introduced himself as Special Agent David Chen. His partner, a younger woman with sharp features, was Special Agent Maria Santos. Miss Hart, thank you for coming in, Agent Chen said, gesturing to the chairs arranged around a conference table. I know this can't be easy, especially given the circumstances of your previous encounter with Mr. Vega. I want to help however I can, Lena said, taking the seat Rachel indicated. Before we begin, I need to establish a few things for the record. Agent Chen opened a folder, revealing documents and photographs. You're here voluntarily, correct? No one has coerced or pressured you into providing testimony? I'm here voluntarily. And you understand that lying to a federal agent is a crime punishable by law? I understand. Agent Santos activated a recording device on the table. This interview is being recorded. For the record, please state your full name and date of birth. Lena Marie Hart, March 15, 1994. Thank you. Let's start at the beginning. 3 years ago, you were working at the Grandview Hotel in Chicago. Can you tell us about the night of August 23rd? Lena took a breath and began to recount the story she'd been running from for 3 years. She described her shift that night, the routine of cleaning conference rooms on the executive floors, the moment she'd heard voices and assumed the room was empty. She described opening the door and seeing 2 men. One she now knew was Daniel Cooper, the other Marcus Vega. What were they discussing? Agent Chen asked, making notes. Weapons shipments. The man I didn't know, Agent Cooper, was telling Marcus that he had evidence of illegal arms trafficking. He said he had recordings, documents, enough to put Marcus away for life. He told Marcus his operation was finished. And how did Mr. Vega respond? Lena's hands tightened in her lap. He smiled, told Agent Cooper that he'd made a mistake coming alone, that he should have known better. Then he pulled a gun and shot him, twice, center mass. The room was silent except for the quiet hum of the recording device. Agent Santos's expression remained neutral, but Lena saw something flash in her eyes, anger, maybe, or recognition of the loss of a fellow law enforcement officer. "What did you do next?" Agent Chen prompted. "I ran. The second the gun fired, I turned and ran for the service elevator. I could hear Marcus shouting for his men to find the witness, to search the floor. I made it to the elevator, got down to the ground level through the service entrance, and left the hotel. I went straight to my apartment, packed a bag, and disappeared that night." "You didn't contact the police? The FBI?" "No, I was terrified. Marcus Vega is powerful, connected. I didn't know who I could trust, and I didn't have any evidence beyond my word. I thought if I came forward, I'd just be putting a target on my back with nothing to show for it." "So you ran instead? Changed your name, moved cities?" "Yes. I became invisible, took jobs where I could stay anonymous, kept to myself, never got close to anyone. I thought if I could just stay hidden long enough, Marcus would stop looking." Agent Santos leaned forward. "But he never did stop looking, did he?" "No, I didn't know that until last week, but apparently he's been searching for 3 years. And when I saw him at the wedding, when he got close enough to start recognizing me, everything I'd been running from caught up with me." "Let's talk about that wedding," Agent Chen said. "You attended as Victor Moretti's date. How did that come about?" Lena explained her employment at the Moretti estate, Victor's unexpected invitation, and the coincidence of Marcus being at the same event. She described the moment she'd recognized him, Victor's immediate response, and the decision to leave before Marcus could identify her completely. "And Mr. Moretti has been protecting you since that night," Agent Santos said, glancing at Victor, who had remained silent throughout the interview. "Why?" "Because I needed protection, and he was in a position to provide it," Lena said simply. "Marcus Vega is dangerous. He kills people who threaten his operation. Victor has resources and connections that kept me safe while we figured out how to handle the situation." "But by handle the situation, you mean the coordinated release of evidence against Mr. Vega that happened this morning," Agent Chen said, his tone carefully neutral. Victor spoke for the first time since they'd entered the room. "I think you'll find that all the evidence provided was obtained legally and documented thoroughly. If you have questions about methodology, my attorney can address them." "I'm sure she can." Agent Chen's expression gave nothing away. "Miss Hart, I need to ask you directly, has your relationship with Mr. Moretti influenced or changed your testimony in any way?" "No, what I witnessed 3 years ago is what I witnessed. That hasn't changed regardless of who's been helping me stay alive long enough to tell you about it." Agent Santos studied Lena for a long moment. "You know that testifying against Marcus Vega is going to make you a target. Even with him in custody, his organization still exists. There are people loyal to him who might try to retaliate." I understand that. "And you're willing to accept that risk?" Lena thought about the past 3 years, the constant fear, the careful invisibility, the loneliness of never letting anyone close enough to really know her. She thought about Daniel Cooper, a federal agent who died trying to bring a criminal to justice. And she thought about Victor's words from the night before, about having choices and freedom once this was over. "Yes," she said firmly, "I'm willing to accept that risk. Daniel Cooper died trying to stop Marcus Vega. The least I can do is make sure his death meant something." The interview continued for another 2 hours. The agents asked detailed questions about the hotel layout, the exact sequence of events, Marcus's appearance and behavior, anything Lena could remember about the conversation she'd overheard. They showed her photographs to confirm identifications, walked her through timeline discrepancies, and tested her memory from every angle. By the time Agent Chen finally turned off the recording device, Lena was exhausted. "Thank you for your cooperation, Miss Hart," he said, closing his folder. "Your testimony is going to be crucial to this case. We'll be in touch as the investigation proceeds, and we'll need you to testify before a grand jury at some point. I'll be available whenever you need me. Agent Santos walked them to the elevator. For what it's worth, you did the right thing. Not many people would have the courage to testify against someone like Marcus Vega. I didn't feel like I had a choice. You always have a choice. You chose justice over safety. That takes strength. Agent Santos glanced at Victor. And you chose good protection. Mr. Moretti has a reputation for taking care of people under his wing. Victor's expression remained neutral. I protect what's mine. They left the FBI building and climbed into Victor's car. Lena felt the tension that had been coiling in her chest for hours finally start to ease. It was done. She'd given her statement, identified Marcus Vega as Daniel Cooper's killer, and set in motion the justice that had been delayed for 3 years. How do you feel? Victor asked as the car pulled into traffic. Terrified, relieved, exhausted. Lena leaned her head back against the seat. Like I just jumped off a cliff and I'm not sure if there's water at the bottom or rocks. The FBI will build their case carefully. With your testimony and the evidence I provided, Marcus won't see the outside of a prison cell for decades. That's water, not rocks. What about his organization? Agent Santos said there might be retaliation. There might be, which is why you're staying under protection until the situation stabilizes. Victor's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen. His expression shifted to something that might have been satisfaction. Marcus was arrested an hour ago. Multiple federal charges including murder of a law enforcement officer, weapons trafficking, racketeering, and obstruction of justice. No bail. The news should have brought relief, but Lena felt strangely numb. For 3 years, Marcus Vega had been the monster in her nightmares, the threat that shaped every decision she made, and now he was in custody, facing charges that would end his freedom permanently. It's really over, she said quietly. The immediate danger is over. The legal process will take time, but yes, Marcus Vega can't hurt you anymore. Victor pocketed his phone, which means you need to start thinking about what comes next. I don't know what comes next. I've spent 3 years in survival mode. I don't know how to think beyond that. Then take your time figuring it out. You have resources, you have protection, and you have options. There's no rush to make decisions. The car took them back to the penthouse, and Lena found herself grateful for the familiar space. She'd only been there a few days, but it already felt safer than anywhere she'd lived in 3 years. That evening, Victor received a call from Antonio. Lena could hear only one side of the conversation, but Victor's responses told her enough. Yes, he's in custody. Federal charges, multiple counts. She testified this afternoon. No, she's safe. Antonio, I told you this was handled. Fine, if it makes you feel better. Victor ended the call and turned to Lena. My family wants to meet you properly. Antonio thinks you deserve an apology for the chaos at his wedding, and my mother wants to satisfy her curiosity about the woman who's caused such upheaval in our lives. Do I have a choice? Always. But they mean well, and it might be good for you to see that not everyone in my world is dangerous. Lena considered it. Meeting Victor's family felt like crossing another threshold, acknowledging that her relationship with Victor had become something more complex than simple protection. But she also recognized that Victor was offering her something important, acceptance into a circle that didn't readily open to outsiders. Okay, she said. When? This weekend. We'll drive up to the mountain property where they've been staying. It's secure, private, and far from the chaos downtown. Victor's expression softened. Fair warning. My mother is going to interrogate you extensively. She's protective of family, and she'll want to understand exactly who you are and what you mean to me. What do I mean to you? Lena asked, the question out before she could stop herself. Victor was quiet for a moment, his gaze holding hers with that same intensity that had first unsettled her at the wedding. I'm still figuring that out, but I know you're not just someone I'm protecting out of obligation. You're someone who matters. That's rare in my world. The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither of them seemed ready to fully explore. Lena felt her heart rate pick up, felt the pull of something that had been building since the night Victor had asked her to trust him. Before she could respond, Victor's phone rang again. This time his expression darkened as he answered. What? A pause. When? Another pause, longer. Lock down the building. No one in or out without verification. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He ended the call and was already moving toward the door. There's a situation at one of my properties. I need to handle it personally. What kind of situation? Someone tried to access my private offices. Security stopped them, but I need to verify it's not connected to Marcus's organization trying to retaliate. Victor paused at the door. Stay here. The security team knows not to let anyone up except me. You'll be safe. Victor, I'll be back within 2 hours. I promise. Then he was gone, leaving Lena alone with the security team and her increasingly complicated thoughts about what Victor Moretti had become to her. She tried to distract herself with television, with reading, with anything that would quiet the voice in her head that kept replaying Victor's words. You're someone who matters. What did that mean exactly? And why did the possibility of it meaning more than protection make her chest feel tight with something that wasn't quite fear? An hour passed, then 90 minutes. Lena checked her phone compulsively, but there were no messages from Victor. She told herself that everything was fine, that he was just being thorough, that there was no reason to worry. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her swipe to accept the call. Lena Hart. The voice was familiar, smooth, and absolutely terrifying. Marcus Vega. I think we need to have a conversation. Lena's blood turned to ice. You're supposed to be in custody. I have resources you don't understand. Making a phone call from detention isn't as difficult as people think. Marcus's tone was conversational, almost friendly. I wanted to reach out personally before things go too far. Woman to woman, so to speak. We have nothing to discuss. On the contrary, we have everything to discuss. You've caused significant problems for my operation, Miss Hart. But I'm a reasonable man. I'm willing to offer you a deal. I'm not interested in any deals. You haven't heard the terms yet. Here's what I'm offering. You recant your testimony, claim you were mistaken or coerced by Victor Moretti, and I'll ensure you disappear safely. New identity, financial support, protection from any retaliation. You get to live, and we both move on with our lives. And if I refuse, then I'm forced to pursue less pleasant alternatives. Victor Moretti may think he's protected you, but he can't watch you every second of every day. And when he's not watching, my people will be. It might take weeks, it might take months, but eventually there will be a moment when you're vulnerable, and that's when you'll wish you'd taken my offer. Lena's hand tightened on the phone. You killed a federal agent. You threatened innocent people. You've spent 3 years hunting me because I witnessed your crime. And now you think I'm going to help you walk away from justice? You're delusional. I'm realistic. I know how the world works, Miss Hart. Victor Moretti is powerful, but he's not invincible. His protection only extends as far as his reach, and there are places even he can't guard. So I suggest you think very carefully about which side of this situation you want to be on when everything comes crashing down. I've already made my choice. I testified. I identified you as Daniel Cooper's killer, and I'm going to watch you spend the rest of your life in prison for what you did. Brave words from someone who's been hiding for 3 years. Marcus's voice hardened. But bravery and stupidity often look the same until the consequences arrive. Remember this conversation, Lena. Remember that I offered you a way out. When things get difficult, and they will get difficult, remember that you chose this path. The call ended abruptly, leaving Lena staring at her phone with her heart racing. She should call the FBI, report the threat. She should tell the security team. She should do something other than stand frozen in the penthouse living room trying to control the fear that Marcus's words had triggered. She was still standing there when Victor returned 40 minutes later. He took one look at her face and went completely still. What happened? Marcus called me. From detention. He offered me a deal to recant my testimony, and when I refused, he threatened me. The words came out in a rush. He said you can't protect me every second, that eventually there will be a moment when I'm vulnerable, and that's when his people will make their move. Victor's expression went cold in a way that was genuinely frightening. What number did he call from? Lena showed him her phone, and Victor immediately made several calls of his own. She could hear him reporting the contact to the FBI, demanding explanations for how Marcus had accessed a phone, insisting on increased security measures. When he finally ended the calls, his jaw was tight with controlled fury. Marcus shouldn't have been able to make that call. Someone on the inside helped him, which means he still has more reach than we realized. He said exactly that. Said you're powerful but not invincible, that your protection only extends so far. He's trying to scare you, make you doubt, make you vulnerable to manipulation. Victor moved closer, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders. Lena, listen to me. Marcus Vega is desperate. Desperate people make threats they can't back up because they're running out of options. Yes, he has some remaining resources, some loyalty from his organization, but every day he's in custody, that influence weakens. Every piece of evidence that comes to light, every witness who agrees to testify, every financial record that gets examined, it all diminishes his power. But what if he's right? What if there is a moment when I'm vulnerable, when your protection isn't enough? Then we make sure that moment never comes. I'm moving you to the mountain property tomorrow. It's the most secure location I own. With security measures Marcus's people couldn't penetrate even if they tried. Victor's gaze was intense. And I'm staying with you. No more leaving you alone. No more situations where you're without immediate backup. If Marcus wants to threaten you, he'll have to go through me first. Victor, you can't put your entire life on hold because of me. I'm not putting my life on hold. I'm making a choice about priorities, and right now, keeping you safe is my priority. His hands tightened slightly on her shoulders. Marcus made a mistake calling you. He showed his hand, revealed that he's rattled enough to risk additional charges by making threats from detention. That tells me we're winning, and he knows it. Lena wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that Victor's certainty was based on reality rather than just determination. But Marcus's words kept echoing in her mind, reminding her that 3 years of running had taught her one crucial lesson. There was no such thing as absolute safety. What if this never really ends? She asked quietly. What if even with Marcus in prison, his organization comes after me? What if I spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder? Then you'll be looking over your shoulder with the full weight of my protection and resources backing you up. You won't be alone anymore, Lena. That's the difference. Victor's expression softened. I know fear. I know what it's like to live with the constant awareness that danger could strike at any moment. But I also know that facing threats with allies is better than facing them alone. And you have allies now. Me, my family, the FBI, everyone who wants to see Marcus Vega face justice. That matters. Lena wanted to believe him, needed to believe him, but years of survival instinct made trust difficult. Still, standing in Victor's penthouse with his hands steady on her shoulders and his eyes absolutely certain, she found herself choosing to believe anyway. Okay, she said. We go to the mountain property tomorrow. First thing in the morning. I'll have everything arranged. Victor's phone buzzed again, and he glanced at it with a frown. The FBI is opening an investigation into how Marcus made that call. They're taking the threat seriously. Good, because I'm taking it seriously too. That night, Lena packed the few belongings she'd accumulated during her week at the penthouse. It wasn't much. Some clothes Daniela had left behind, toiletries, the emerald dress from the wedding that she couldn't quite bring herself to leave behind. As she folded the silk fabric, she thought about how much had changed in such a short time. A week ago, that dress had represented the most terrifying night of her life. Now it felt like evidence of transformation, proof that she could face impossible situations and survive. Victor found her in the bedroom, staring at the dress in her hands. Having second thoughts about keeping it? He asked from the doorway. No, just remembering. Lena carefully placed the dress in the bag. A week ago, I was invisible. Now I'm a federal witness against one of the most dangerous criminals in the region, hiding in a mountain compound with protection I never could have imagined needing. It's surreal. Life has a way of changing faster than we expect. Victor leaned against the doorframe. For what it's worth, I think the change suits you. You're not meant to be invisible, Lena. You keep saying that because it's true. Invisibility was survival, but it wasn't living. You're living now, even if it's messier and scarier than hiding ever was. Lena met his eyes across the room. Is that what you do? Live instead of just survive? I try to. In my world, survival is a baseline requirement. But I've seen too many people who survive without ever actually living, who move through life afraid of making waves, afraid of being seen, afraid of mattering. I decided a long time ago that if I was going to exist in this world, I was going to do it on my own terms. Victor pushed off the doorframe. You have that same strength in you. You just haven't had the freedom to use it yet. The words settled over Lena like a promise and a challenge. What would she do with freedom if she actually had it? Who would she become without fear dictating every choice? She didn't have answers yet, but for the first time in 3 years, she wanted to find out. They left for the mountain property at dawn. The drive took nearly 3 hours, winding through increasingly remote terrain until they reached a private road that climbed into heavily forested hills. The property itself was stunning, a modern compound built into the mountainside with panoramic views of the valley below. Security was visible but discreet, with cameras monitoring every approach and guards stationed at key points. Francesca Moretti met them at the entrance, her silver hair caught back in an elegant twist and her expression carefully neutral as she watched Lena emerge from the car. "So you've brought her here," Francesca said to Victor. "That's quite a statement." "It's the safest location we have. Given the circumstances, safety takes priority over optics." Victor guided Lena forward with a hand at her lower back. "Mother, you remember Lena Hart?" "I'm not likely to forget the woman who's turned my son's world upside down in a week." But Francesca's tone wasn't unkind. "Come inside, Miss Hart. We should talk." The interior of the compound was as impressive as the exterior, all clean lines, natural materials, and floor-to-ceiling windows that brought the mountain landscape inside. Antonio and his wife Carmen were in the main living area, and Antonio stood immediately when he saw them. "Lena." He crossed the room to embrace her, surprising her with the warmth of the gesture. "I'm glad you're safe. Victor told us about Marcus's call. That took courage, refusing his offer." "I'm not sure it was courage. Might have just been stubbornness. In my experience, those two things are often the same." Antonio released her and gestured to Carmen. "My wife wanted to meet you properly, without the chaos of a wedding getting in the way." Carmen was petite and elegant, with warm brown eyes and a smile that seemed genuinely welcoming. "I feel terrible that our wedding became the catalyst for all this drama. Antonio tells me you witnessed something terrible years ago, and seeing Marcus there must have been horrifying." "It wasn't your fault. Marcus being there was just bad timing." "Still, I'm sorry you had to go through that." Carmen glanced at Victor. "But I'm glad you had someone who could protect you. Victor's reputation is intimidating, but he's fiercely loyal to the people he cares about." The phrasing made Lena's breath catch slightly. The people he cares about. Was that what she was to Victor? Someone he cared about, not just someone he protected out of obligation? Francesca cleared her throat. "Antonio, Carmen, give us some privacy. I'd like to speak with Miss Hart alone." Victor tensed. "Mother, this doesn't concern you, Victor. Go help your brother with whatever project he's working on in the office. I'll return your charge unharmed." Francesca's tone left no room for argument. Antonio practically dragged Victor out of the room, and Carmen followed with an apologetic smile. Lena found herself alone with Francesca Moretti, who gestured to the comfortable chairs arranged near the windows. "Sit, please. This isn't an interrogation, though I imagine it might feel like one." Francesca settled into her own chair with practiced grace. "I want to understand who you are, Lena Hart. Not what you witnessed, not what role you're playing in my son's current situation. Who you actually are." Lena sat, choosing her words carefully. "I'm someone who's been running for 3 years. Someone who witnessed something terrible and made the choice to survive rather than stand up to it immediately. Someone who's trying to figure out who she is without fear making every decision." "That's honest. I appreciate honesty." Francesca studied her with sharp eyes. "My son is a complicated man, powerful, intelligent, absolutely ruthless when circumstances require it. But he's also loyal to a fault and protective of the people he allows into his inner circle. The fact that he brought you here, to this property, tells me you've become one of those people." "I think he just wants to keep me safe until Marcus is no longer a threat." If that were all he wanted, he could have arranged protection through a dozen different channels without personally involving himself. Victor doesn't bring people to family properties unless they matter to him personally. Francesca leaned forward slightly. "So I'll ask you directly. What are your intentions toward my son?" The question caught Lena completely off guard. "I don't have intentions. I'm just trying to survive and do the right thing about testifying. You're also developing feelings for him. I saw it at the wedding, and I see it now in the way you react to his name. Don't bother denying it. I've been reading people for 60 years, and you're not as inscrutable as you think." Lena felt heat rise in her cheeks. Even if that were true, it doesn't matter. Victor is doing this because he's a good person who protects people who need protecting. Once the situation with Marcus is resolved, I'll figure out my own life and Victor will go back to his. Is that what you want? To go back to being separate, living different lives? I don't know what I want. A week ago, I just wanted to stay invisible and safe. Now everything's different, and I haven't had time to process what that means. Francesca was quiet for a long moment. When Victor's father died, my son became the man of this family overnight. He was 19 years old, and suddenly he was responsible for protecting all of us, maintaining the family's interests, and navigating a world full of people who wanted to see him fail. He could have crumbled under that pressure. Instead, he became one of the most formidable men in this city. I've seen that side of him. It's impressive and a little terrifying. But have you seen the man underneath, the one who reads philosophy books at 3 a.m. when he can't sleep? Who remembers every staff member's birthday and makes sure they're taken care of when they have problems? Who carries the weight of protecting everyone around him and never complains about the burden? Francesca's expression softened. That's the Victor I want you to understand, because if you're going to matter to him, and I believe you already do, you need to see all of who he is. Why are you telling me this? Because Victor doesn't let people in easily. The walls he's built are there for good reasons. But when he does let someone inside those walls, he's all in, completely committed, and I need to know that if he's making that choice with you, you're worth it. Lena met Francesca's gaze directly. I don't know if I'm worth it. I'm a housemaid with a criminal past and a dangerous present. I have nothing to offer someone like Victor except complications and risk. You're wrong about that. You offer him something he rarely gets, honesty without agenda. You didn't seek him out, didn't try to use him, didn't want anything from him until circumstances forced you to need his protection. That kind of authentic connection is rare in our world. Francesca stood, signaling the conversation was ending. I'm not saying you need to have all the answers right now. I'm saying pay attention to what's developing between you and my son, because whether you realize it or not, you're changing him. And he's changing you. That kind of transformation doesn't happen between people who don't matter to each other. After Francesca left, Lena sat alone in the living room, processing everything the older woman had said. She'd been so focused on survival, on getting through each day without Marcus finding her, that she hadn't let herself think about what was growing between her and Victor. But Francesca was right. There was something there, something that went beyond gratitude or protection. Victor found her an hour later, still sitting by the windows and watching the mountain landscape. "My mother didn't traumatize you too badly?" he asked, settling into the chair Francesca had vacated. "She was actually kind, in a terrifying, all-knowing sort of way. That's her specialty, reading people, understanding their motivations, seeing things they try to hide." Victor's expression was wry. "What did she want to know?" "My intentions toward you." Victor's eyebrows rose. "And what did you tell her?" "That I don't have intentions, that I'm just trying to survive and do the right thing." Lena turned to look at him. "But she didn't believe me. Said I was developing feelings for you and that you were letting me inside your walls. Is that true?" For a long moment, Victor was silent, his gaze fixed on the mountains beyond the window. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than usual. "I told you before that you're someone who matters. I meant it. You've become important to me in ways I didn't anticipate and probably should have guarded against more carefully." He turned to face her. "But Lena, my world is dangerous. The life I lead, the choices I make, the enemies I accumulate. It's not a safe place for people I care about. My father died because someone he trusted betrayed him. I've seen what happens when the people you love become targets. So yes, I have walls. And yes, I'm careful about who I let past them, because letting someone in means accepting the risk that they could be hurt because of me. I'm already at risk because of you. Marcus targeted me because you protected me." "Exactly, which is why I should probably maintain professional distance. Make sure this stays purely protective rather than personal." Victor's jaw tightened. But I'm finding that increasingly difficult. Lena's heart hammered in her chest. Why? Because you see me. Not the reputation, not the power, not the fear that most people associate with my name. You see the man who reads at 3 in the morning and remembers birthdays and carries the weight of protecting everyone around him. And being seen like that, really seen, is addictive. Your mother said the same thing about you being all in when you let someone inside your walls. My mother knows me too well. Victor stood and moved to the window, putting distance between them. Lena, I need you to understand what you'd be signing up for if this became something more than protection. My life is complicated, dangerous, and full of moral ambiguity that would make most people uncomfortable. I make decisions that keep people safe but aren't always legal. I operate in gray areas that require accepting realities most people would rather ignore. And anyone close to me becomes part of that world, whether they want to or not. I've spent 3 years running from a murderer and just testified against him with the full knowledge that it makes me a target. I think I'm already pretty familiar with moral ambiguity and danger. That's different. That's survival. What I'm talking about is choosing to stay in that world even when you have options to leave it. Lena stood and crossed to where Victor was standing. What if I don't want to leave it? What if I want to know what it's like to stop running and start living, like you said? What if I want to see where this goes between us without fear making the decision? Victor turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. Then you need to be sure. Because once we cross that line, there's no going back to professional distance. Once I claim you as mine in truth, and not just for protection, every enemy I have will know you matter. That makes you a target permanently. I'm already a target. Marcus made sure of that. At least this way I'd be a target who matters to someone, who has real allies, who isn't facing the danger alone. Lena reached out and placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her palm. Victor, for 3 years I've lived without connecting to anyone, without letting myself want anything beyond safety. I'm tired of that. I'm tired of being afraid to live because living might be dangerous. So yes, I'm sure. I want to see where this goes. Victor's hand covered hers, warm and solid. You're braver than you think, or more desperate for something real. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. Victor pulled her closer, his other hand coming up to cup her face. Lena, if we do this, I need you to know I don't do anything halfway. If you're mine completely. That means my protection, my resources, my commitment, all of it. But it also means accepting the complications that come with being connected to me. I understand. Do you? Because my enemies won't hesitate to use you against me. My family will have opinions about who I choose. The life you'd be stepping into isn't simple or safe or anything like normal. I haven't had normal in 3 years. And I'm standing in a mountain compound under armed guard because a crime boss is threatening my life. I think the ship of simple and safe has already sailed. Lena met his eyes. I'm not asking for normal. I'm asking for real. For someone who sees me and lets me see them in return. For a life that's mine by choice instead of by circumstance. Can you give me that? Instead of answering with words, Victor kissed her. It was careful at first, testing, giving her space to change her mind. But when Lena leaned into him, her free hand coming up to tangle in his hair, the kiss deepened into something that felt like a claim and a promise all at once. When they finally broke apart, Victor rested his forehead against hers. That was probably a terrible decision for both of us. Probably. But I'm tired of making only good decisions. Then we're in agreement. Victor's smile was genuine, transforming his usually controlled features into something warmer. Though my mother is going to be insufferable about being right. About what? She told me 2 days ago that I was falling for you and should just accept it, rather than fighting the inevitable. He pulled Lena closer. Apparently she's known me long enough to recognize when I'm fighting a losing battle with my own feelings. The admission made Lena's chest feel tight with something that wasn't quite fear, but felt just as overwhelming. How long have you been falling? Since you handled Isabella Castellano with more grace than she deserved, since you trusted me enough to tell me about Marcus, since I watched you give your FBI statement with courage most people twice your age don't possess. Victor's thumb traced along her jaw. You've been changing my world since the moment I asked you to that wedding, Lena. I just didn't want to admit how much until now. They spent the rest of the day with Victor's family, and Lena felt the shift in how everyone treated her. Francesca's knowing smiles, Antonio's approving nods, Carmen's warm inclusion in conversation, they all seemed to recognize that something had changed, that Lena had moved from protected outsider to something more integrated into the Moretti family structure. That evening, as the sun set over the mountains in spectacular displays of orange and gold, Victor received a call from his FBI contact. Lena watched his expression shift from neutral to satisfied as he listened. Understood. Thank you for the update. He ended the call and turned to Lena with something that looked like relief. Marcus's organization is falling apart faster than anticipated. 3 of his top lieutenants cut deals with the FBI in exchange for reduced sentences. They're providing testimony that corroborates everything you said and adds additional charges to Marcus's case. So it's really over? The immediate threat is over. Marcus will be facing trial within 6 months, and with the evidence against him, conviction is almost guaranteed. He's looking at life in prison without possibility of parole. Victor moved closer. You're safe, Lena. For the first time in 3 years, you can actually breathe without looking over your shoulder. The words should have brought relief, but Lena found herself feeling oddly empty. For so long, fear had been her constant companion, shaping every decision and defining her existence. Without it, she wasn't entirely sure who she was supposed to be. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now you get to decide who you want to be, where you want to live, what you want to do, how you want to spend your life now that you're not running anymore. Victor's hands came to rest on her shoulders. And if you want, you get to explore what this is between us without Marcus Vega hanging over your head. I don't know how to do that, how to just be normal. Then we'll figure it out together. Because I don't do normal either, but I'm willing to learn if you are. Over the next 2 weeks, Lena stayed at the mountain property and began the slow process of rediscovering who she was without fear. She helped Carmen in the garden, had long conversations with Francesca about everything from literature to family dynamics, and spent hours with Victor learning about his world, the legitimate businesses, the complicated relationships, the careful balance between power and responsibility. She also testified before the grand jury, providing the detailed account that would ensure Marcus Vega's indictment on multiple federal charges. Agent Chen told her afterward that her testimony had been crucial, that she'd done more for justice than she probably realized. Daniel Cooper's family wanted me to thank you, Chen said as they left the courthouse. They've waited 3 years for answers about what happened to him. Your courage in coming forward means they'll finally get justice. The words stayed with Lena long after the meeting ended. She'd spent so long thinking of herself as a coward for running, for hiding instead of immediately coming forward. But maybe survival had been its own kind of courage. Maybe staying alive long enough to eventually provide testimony was worth more than dying to prove a point. A month after Victor had brought her to the mountain property, Lena made a decision. She found Victor in his office, working through documents related to one of his legitimate business ventures. I want to go back to school, she said without preamble, get my degree, figure out what I actually want to do with my life now that I have the freedom to choose. Victor looked up from his papers, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. What would you study? Criminal justice, maybe, or social work. Something that helps people who are in situations like I was, vulnerable, scared, not sure where to turn. Lena moved further into the room. I can't change what happened to me, but maybe I can use it to help other people. That's a good choice, a meaningful one. Victor stood and crossed to where she was standing. I can help with tuition, living expenses, whatever you need to make that happen. I don't want to be someone you take care of financially. I want to do this myself. Then do it yourself. But accept help when it makes sense. There's no shame in using available resources to achieve your goals. His expression softened. Lena, you've spent 3 years trying to be completely self-sufficient because connection felt dangerous. But you're not alone anymore. Accepting help doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart. She thought about that, about how survival had meant isolation, but living might mean learning to accept support without seeing it as weakness or obligation. Okay, she said finally, I'll accept reasonable help, but I'm also getting a job, earning my own money, building something that's mine. I wouldn't expect anything less. Victor pulled her into his arms. You're going to be brilliant at whatever you choose to do. You already have more strength and determination than most people develop in a lifetime. The trial happened 4 months later. Lena testified for 2 full days, recounting in excruciating detail everything she'd witnessed the night Daniel Cooper was murdered. Marcus's defense attorney tried to discredit her, suggested she was lying for personal gain or had been coerced by Victor Moretti. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the testimony from Marcus's former lieutenants corroborated every detail of Lena's account. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Marcus Vega was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, with additional consecutive sentences that ensured he would die behind bars. Lena watched the sentencing from the gallery, seated between Victor and Agent Chen. When the judge read the final sentence, she felt something release in her chest, a tension she'd been carrying for 3 years finally letting go. "It's over," Victor said quietly, his hand finding hers. "It's over," Lena repeated, and this time she believed it. After the trial, Lena enrolled in university classes and started the process of building a life that was hers by choice rather than circumstance. She moved into her own apartment near campus, modest but comfortable, with security that Victor insisted on but didn't make her feel imprisoned. She got a part-time job at a women's shelter, helping survivors of violence navigate the complicated systems designed to protect them. And she explored what it meant to be with Victor Moretti, to be someone who mattered to a man whose world was complicated but whose commitment was absolute. It wasn't easy. There were nights when Victor's business kept him away for days, when Lena had to accept that parts of his life would always be separate from hers. There were moments when people looked at her with judgment or suspicion, wondering what a university student had in common with one of the city's most powerful men. There were complications and challenges, and moments when the differences between their worlds felt insurmountable. But there were also mornings when Victor showed up at her apartment with coffee and pastries, having driven across the city just to see her before class. There were evenings when they'd sit on her small balcony and talk for hours about everything and nothing. There were moments when he looked at her with such certainty that she felt truly seen, truly valued, truly loved in a way she'd never experienced before. 6 months after the trial, Lena graduated with honors and accepted a position at a nonprofit that helped crime victims navigate the legal system. Victor attended the ceremony with his entire family, and the pride on his face when she walked across the stage made Lena's chest feel tight with emotion. "I'm proud of you," he said afterward, pulling her into his arms despite the crowd around them. "You've built something real, something meaningful. You should be proud of yourself." "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have. You're the strongest person I know, Lena Hart. I just gave you the space and safety to prove it to yourself." A year after the wedding that had changed everything, Antonio and Carmen renewed their vows in a small private ceremony at the mountain property. This time Lena attended not as Victor's shocking choice, but as an integrated part of the Moretti family, someone who belonged there without question. As she watched Antonio and Carmen exchange their vows, promising forever to each other, Lena felt Victor's hand find hers. She looked up at him and saw something in his expression that made her heart skip. "What?" she asked quietly. "I'm thinking about the night I chose you as my date for this wedding. Everyone thought I was making some kind of power play or social statement, but the truth is, I chose you because you were the only person in my house who looked at me and saw a man instead of a weapon or a resource." Victor's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I didn't know then that choosing you for one night would end up changing my entire life." "Changed mine too, in ways I'm still discovering." "Good changes?" Lena thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, invisible, afraid, living half a life in the shadows. And she thought about who she was now, someone with purpose, with connections, with a future that belonged to her instead of to fear. "The best changes," she said, "the kind that make you realize what you were missing even when you thought you had everything you needed." Victor lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I love you, Lena Hart. I probably shouldn't, and it definitely complicates both our lives. But I do. Completely." The words should have terrified her. Love meant vulnerability, meant giving someone the power to hurt you, meant accepting risk without guarantee of outcome. But looking at Victor, this complicated, powerful, fiercely protective man who'd seen her at her most vulnerable and chosen to stand beside her anyway. Lena found she wasn't afraid. "I love you too," she said, and felt the truth of it settle over her like armor. "Which probably makes us both crazy, but I'm okay with that." "Then we're agreed. Mutual insanity it is." They stayed at the mountain property for the rest of the weekend, celebrating with Victor's family and watching the sun set over the mountains in spectacular displays of color. And as Lena stood on the deck with Victor's arms around her and his family's laughter floating from inside the house, she realized that this was what freedom felt like. Not the absence of danger or complication, but the presence of choice, the ability to decide who she wanted to be, who she wanted to love, how she wanted to live her life. Marcus Vega had tried to make her a victim, a target, someone defined by what she'd witnessed and what she'd run from. But Victor had helped her become something else entirely, a survivor who'd chosen to stop surviving and start living instead. And that, Lena thought as Victor pressed a kiss to her temple, was worth every risk, every complication, every moment of fear that had led her to this point. Because the woman standing on this deck, loved and valued and free to choose her own future, was someone she'd fought hard to become. And she wasn't invisible anymore. She was seen, she was known, and she mattered. That was everything.